Summit Park. How we doing this morning, everybody? I hope you're doing good. Hope you're feeling caffeinated, and hope you're feeling just alive this morning. We're kicking off a brand new series called King Me, and it's all about checkers. How many checkers fans do we have in the house? You like to play a little checkers at home with the fam? It's a great family game. What I love about checkers is it's so simple, right? I mean, chess, you just, there's a lot of thinking, but checkers, it's very simple strategy. It's a good time. Almost anybody can play checkers, and the idea, if you've never played checkers, is basically this. You take your piece, and you jump over someone else's piece, and then you take their piece. It's this kind of classic domination. That's the name of the game, all right? You just dominate the other player. And I love playing this with my kids. Number one, because I like teaching my kids. I like just spending time with my kids. But I also like beating my kids at games. I really do. It's just enjoyable. And I think we should train our kids how to win. Can I get an amen on that? There are no participation trophies in life, everybody. We need to train these kids how to win. And so I beat them over and over and over again at checkers. And I just love it. It's just a good time. I love it. And I love checkers because the whole point, or one of the best parts about checkers is when you get to the back line, right? And you get a piece, and then the other person has to put a piece like yours on top of them. And when you get to that back line, you say, "King me, king me." And it's great because when you say "king me," basically what you're going to get is another piece that is just like yours, and it's going to give you extra power. It's going to give you turbo power, all right? You don't have to follow the rules anymore. The normal rules that you had to follow, which you could only go forward, now you can go backwards. So you got more power, you got more autonomy, you got more control. It's a beautiful thing, right? It's awesome, and you're in charge. You've got control. You've got more power, and you think, this is amazing. Now I'm going to dominate. And what I want to do is take this whole series, and I want to use this little illustration because this is how we think about life. A lot of times we'll think about life, the more power I have, the more control I have, the better it's going to work out for me. But the opposite is actually true, isn't it? The more autonomy, the more control, the more of myself that I have, and usually it doesn't work very well for me. Any testimonials out there, all right? Any testimonials out there? I'll share a little example for me. When I was 16, I just got my license, and my dad let me drive what was our family vehicle, which had become one of his work vans, an '88 Plymouth Voyager, y'all, all right? Minivan. I'm 16 and I'm cruising in a Plymouth Voyager minivan. It was almost a decade old. It was amazing. And so I first got my license, and I remember pulling up to the stoplight, and I was just impatient. I thought I was a great driver because every 16-year-old driver is, in their own mind, an amazing driver. And I thought, I'm going to be amazing. I'm going to be awesome. And so, I'm at this light. I'm with my friends, and, you just do dumb things. And so I was I don't want to wait. And I started to back up. And I thought there was enough room in between me and the guy behind me, because I've been driving for all of 2 weeks, and I thought I could just judge this. And so I literally looked back, and I thought there was enough room. And I hit him. It was very light. It was a very light, I would consider it a tap. I wouldn't even consider it a hit. It was more of a tap. And so I'm thinking, in that moment, all these thoughts are running through your head. Do I stop? Do we call the police? I'm thinking, this could get really bad. My dad's probably gonna take my car away. So I did the most sensible thing is I took off. I took off, all right? And so I thought, he's not gonna follow me. He followed me. In fact, so now I'm flying. We get on the highway, and I go to the left lane. He comes to the left lane, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the movies or something here. So I'm like, I gotta lose him, So I'm flooring it. Kids, do not do this. Do not do this. So I'm flooring it. I'm flying, and then all of a sudden, I see this off ramp. It's three lanes over. And so I'm like, I can make this, and he won't be able to make it. So I go, and he comes over, but he's not able to make it. And I'm looking at him. He's looking at me. He's like, I'm like, hey. And I think I've gotten away with it. I'm scared, though. Like, I'm scared. I'm like, but I got away with it. And so I was like, whew, man, that was close. That could have been really, really bad. 2 weeks later, get a letter from the police department. I don't get it. My parents get it, and they bring it to my attention. And they say, hey, what happened a couple weeks ago? And I was like, nothing. You didn't get in any accident or anything? No accidents here. No, I was pretty good. And you didn't hit anybody? And I'm like, all of a sudden, like, oh, snap. Hit and run on my record. So my dad goes, hey, you've been driving for 2 weeks. I'm going to take the keys away for 6 months. And so I was like 6 months, again, having to bum rides while the car just sits there, and my mom takes me to school. How many know that's real fun? And so 6 months goes by, and my dad finally gives me the keys again. I'm working for him one time, and we're driving to this job, and there's this sign that says like 45 miles an hour. This curve is 45 miles an hour, and I'm like, I think I could probably go faster than 45. And so, like, I'm going faster. Like, I'm doing, like I'm with people. Again, this is peer pressure. It's not good. And so I'm with people, and I'm driving. I'm probably doing, like, I don't know, maybe 60, 65 or something like that. And it's a highway, all right? It's a highway. But they just suggested you do 45 miles an hour. Because the curve was relatively sharp or something like that. And so, like, I'm driving, and I'm going, see, I'm like, look, we're doing fine. All of a sudden, I see, like, this old Mustang on the side of the road, and all of a sudden, it has lights that kick on. And so my dad was, like, a couple miles behind me. He was going to meet us at the job, and so I'm like, oh, my goodness. Literally, I've had my license back. I've been able to drive for, like, a week. And so I'm like, I just pray he doesn't see me. I just pray. Sure enough, the undercover cop pulls me over, and I go to the side, and I'm just like, oh man, this is so bad. This is so bad. This is so bad. I hope my dad doesn't see. I hope my dad doesn't see me. He's got this big blue van, and I see he just drives right by, and I'm like, oh, I hope he didn't see it. Hope he didn't see it. He comes over to the edge. He's literally a mile down the road on like the edge of the highway, and he just starts going backwards. And he gets out of the car, and he comes up to me. He doesn't even ask a question. He doesn't ask what happened. He just goes, that's going to be another 6 months. And he just walks right back to his car. I was like, oh, my gosh. When I've been in the most control, I've made some of my biggest mistakes. Anybody else out there, right? And there's a lot more stories I don't want to share publicly from this pulpit right now. A lot of times when we're in the most control, we make the biggest messes of our lives. Isn't it true? It's just true. When we think we know best, when we think I've got this, when we think I'm in control, when we think I've got more power, we think this is going to be amazing. But what I want to talk about in this series is how that doesn't work out very well for us. Most of the time, it doesn't work out. Here's the big idea of this series. If you're taking notes, you can write this down. King me isn't all that it's cracked up to be. Because when you get in checkers, you say, king me, basically it's basically like king me. I'm in control. I'm going to be in the power seat. I'm going to be in the driver. I've got more autonomy. And in life, when we do this, it actually works against us. We think we're going to win. We think we're going to get more progress. We think we're going to get further down the field. But whenever we are in the driver's seat of our life spiritually, it will always work against progress in every aspect of our lives. Here's the deal. If you want to make the most progress in your life, if you want to have the most success in your life, it's not going to be because you're king. It's going to be because Jesus is king. It's not king me, it's king he, all right? That's the kind of the big idea. King me isn't all that it's cracked up to be. And so what I want to do in this series, I want to look at the nation of Israel because they serve as a great example of people basically who said, I'm going to be in control. I want to take back the reins of my life. I want to do what I want. And when they make this decision as a nation, everything goes south. Everything spirals down for them. Things were going great. God had been leading them. God had been going before them. God had been fighting their battles. But now all of a sudden, they say, I want to be in control. And things go south in a hurry. So here's what I want to do today. I kind of want to give us a little history lesson. I want to give us a little introduction, and then we're going to set the stage because we're going to be looking at the Old Testament kings. But today we're just going to set the introduction, and we're going to set the table for this. So if you're ready for a little history lesson, say I am. All right, we're going to look at the Old Testament kings. Basically, before the nation of Israel had kings, they had spiritual leaders. Think Moses, think Abraham, where God was speaking through an individual and he was leading them. Wasn't ruling over them because God was their ruler, but God was leading them through spiritual leaders. The other nations had kings that would fight in battle and they would wear crowns and they would sit on thrones. But what God had wanted for his people is he had wanted to be their king. He had wanted to have their affection. He had wanted to have their desire because that's what we're made for. God made us to have God at the center of our life, to be consumed with him, to worship him, to set our affections and our desires and our delights on him, to find meaning in him and not in anything else. But the nation of Israel, they got impatient, and they said, we want to have a king, and we want to have him now. And that's where we pick up our text in 1 Samuel chapter 8. If you have your Bibles with you, I want to invite you, encourage you, turn there. Let's look at 1 Samuel chapter 8, and we're going to look at where things begin to go south for the nation of Israel. They have a priest right now who is basically leading them, spiritually leading them, and his name is Samuel. And Samuel would teach the people, he would instruct the people, he would lead the people in worship of God as their king, and it's exactly what God had wanted for the time being. It wasn't perfect. Ultimately, it would be perfect once Jesus would come on the scene, but it was a placeholder. It was a placeholder. And in 1 Samuel chapter 8, we see this. Samuel's getting old. When Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as Israel's leaders. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second was Abijah, and they served at Beersheba. But his sons did not follow his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. So all the elders of Israel gathered together to Samuel at Ramah, and they said to him, they're really subtle and kind and gracious. They say, you are old. It's not what you say. It's just not what you say. But you can tell the dynamic. You can tell the character of the people. They're not kind. They're not gracious. They're not considerate. You're old. Your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have. If you have your Bible, or if you have your phone, I want you to highlight that. Highlight that verse. That is such an important verse. If you're taking notes, I just write that down. We're going to refer to that over the next couple of moments because that is really, really where all of this goes south. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as the other nations have. We see all these other nations. We want to be like them. Appoint us a king to lead us. But when they said, give us a king to lead us, this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord. This is amazing. He has some problems with the people he's leading. And what does he do? He doesn't kill them. He goes to God. And he doesn't get frustrated and take it out on them. He goes to God, which is a really great principle when you're dealing with something that's stressful with people, especially who are underneath your leadership. He says, and the Lord told him, listen to all that the people are saying to you. It's not you they've rejected, but they rejected me as their king. You ever break up with someone and they say, it's not you, it's me? Some of you have had that. All right, good. We're all family here then. We've all been victims to that at our time, at some point in our life. How many know it's always a lie? It's always a lie. You know, it's never true. It's always you, all right? It's never them. It's always you. You know what Israel's doing? They're breaking up with God. They're literally breaking up with God. And they're rejecting him. And look at what God says in verse 8. As they've done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt until this day. Remember, they were slaves in Egypt. They were in bondage to the Egyptians. It says, they've been forsaking me and serving other gods, and so they are doing to you. Now listen to them. Hear them out, but warn them solemnly and let them know what the king who will reign over them will do to them. He says, I want you to hear them out, listen to them, but let's give them an option here. Let's break this down because they're thinking people, and thinking people are going to make the right choice, right? Like if you have an option to drink a cup of Folgers coffee versus a cup of Starbucks coffee, come on somebody. You know that the best part of waking up is Starbucks in your cup. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just better. You give people the choice of Jack in the Box or Jack Stack, they're going to make the right call. A popsicle versus Andy frozen custard. Come on, everybody, you know. Thinking people are going to make the right decision. It says, just warn them. Just warn them that the popsicle does not taste as good. And look what verse 10, so he does. It says, Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking for a king. He said, this is what the king who will reign over you will claim as his rights. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. Someone's got to serve the king. Someone's got to make this kingdom go. Some he will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and others to plow his ground and reap his harvest. Some are going to die in the army, and some are just going to be working in the field, and still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. And he'll take 1/10 of your grain and of your vintage and give it to his officials and attendants, your male and female servants, and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own use. He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. I mean, you hear this, you're like, of course they're going to choose the right thing. Of course, like the light bulb's going to go on. If that's what's going to happen, Samuel, you've been truthful to us to this point. We've trusted that the very things you are saying are the very words of God. We're definitely not going to do that. But when the day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer in that day. You can have option A, loving God who has served you, who has gone before you, has honored you, has led you, has been good to you, has provided for you. I mean, the nation of Israel had manna. They had literally food provided out of nowhere, in the middle of nowhere. God had fought their battles. God had been good to them. God had provided for them, literally, amazingly, supernaturally. Do you want option A, good God, supernatural provision? Or do you want option B, an earthly king who will dominate you? Anybody's going to choose A, right? They choose B. Watch this. But the people refused to listen to Samuel. No, no, no. They said, we want a king. King me. King us. Then we'll be like the other nations with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles. And when Samuel heard all that the people said, he repeated it before the Lord. And the Lord, watch what God does. God doesn't just kill them. He says, give them a king. Then Samuel said to the Israelites, all right, everybody go home. Game over. And from this moment on, what you will see in the nation of Israel is they have freedom right now. They will begin to lose it. They have joy right now. They will begin to lose it. They have protection and provision. They will begin to lose it. And what we're going to see in this series is these lessons from these kings. Very practical, everyday things that will help us say, things to maybe bring into our life and things to definitely avoid from bringing into our life. Because the nation will lose their country, they'll lose their freedom. Ultimately, the kingdom gets divided into two kingdoms, and they get taken captive as slaves. Everything Samuel said would come true actually comes true. They thought they were winning when they were king of their lives. They thought that having leadership, they thought that getting what they want was the best thing for them, but it actually wasn't. And so here's what I want to do, because we all have this in our life. You and I we all have this in our life, experiences like this. And I want to give us some warning signs that the nation of Israel had, that you and I will also have, warning signs that we're leaning towards a King Me heart as opposed to a King Jesus heart. All right, 3 practical things that will help us know if we're heading towards King Me or King Jesus. So before we do that, turn to the person next to you and say, King Me isn't all it's cracked up to be. Just turn to the person next to you and say, King Me ain't all it's cracked up to be. All right, let me break this down. Warning sign number 1 is this. Warning sign number 1 is this. Thinking we know best. We think we know best. Whenever you feel like I know best, I've got this, I'm in control, that's warning sign number 1. Look what they say. Now appoint a king to lead us. They wanted what they want. Sure, God, we know you're the creator of the world. You spoke the world into existence. You're sustaining all this stuff. You've got wisdom, obviously infinite, eternal wisdom. But we think we're going to go ahead and take it right here. It's like with my kids when I'm playing checkers with my kids. They think when they jump over one of my pieces, they think they're winning. They're like, oh, look, Dad, I got more of your pieces than you have of mine. They think they're winning, but you know what? They're just getting baited into moving off that back line. And I'll do it over and over and over again because I'm teaching them a lesson. I'm raising up winners. But listen, the whole point is they think they're winning. They think they're winning because they're moving forward. They're getting what they think is best. Now, of course, they're kids. It's ignorance. For kids, it's ignorance. For us, it's ignorance, and it's also pride. It's pride when we think we know best. It's pride when we think our way is best. It's pride when we think, I'm going to push my way through. I'm going to do what I want, when I want, where I want. This is pride. This is the American way. We celebrate this. We have a culture that celebrates pride, doing what you want and being strong in your convictions no matter what. It's like typical Americans. Like, you just think of a guy on a motorcycle driving in Montana with no helmet and a cigarette out his mouth. Like, that's kind of like freedom, the picture of freedom. It's like, and if you tell that guy to keep going, he's just going to turn around just because you told him to keep going. American rebel. Like, that's how we are. How many, just be honest for a second, how many of you are like that? Like, you'll do something, but if someone's telling you to do it, you're like, I'm not going to do that anymore. Any rebels in the house? Like, yeah, like, there's something inside of all of us, like, we don't like being told what to do. Now, this is an American thing, but this is a human thing. And this has been our thing from the beginning of this whole thing. Started in the Garden of Eden, right? God tells Adam and Eve, like, hey, listen, you can have anything. You can have anything that you want. Let me show you the scripture right here, Genesis chapter 2. The Lord took man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. Now watch this. And the Lord commanded the man, you are free. Everybody say free. Free. God made us to be free. He said, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die. He says you can eat from any tree, but you can't eat from this one. This is the one that you can't have. Why was there a tree that they couldn't have? I don't know all the reasons, but God had said, this is the one thing you can't have, and I'm just asking you not to do it, but it's the one thing that they couldn't not do. Why? Pride. And actually, that's how Satan comes in and he tempts them and says, did God really say, and will you really die? Do you think God's right? I mean, don't you think you know better than God? This is how it works for us. If he can get in there and mess with us just a little bit and say, oh, no, I think you know a little bit better. No. He just kind of strokes our ego and says, oh, no, you got this. You could do what you want. Surely you know best. Surely you know what's right for your life. The moment that starts happening in our life is the moment King Me starts happening. That's a warning sign. When we notice pride rise up, we have to know this: slavery is beginning to take place. Look what the prophet says, and you yourselves will become his slaves. It cost Adam and Eve the garden, It cost the nation of Israel their country, their identity, their land, everything they had. Ultimately, it will do that. Here's the thing. Here's a principle, and if you're taking notes, write this down. It's this. If we're not led by God, we will be dominated by someone else. This is the truth. This is the truth. If you're not allowing God to lead the aspects of your life, you will be dominated by the thing you are allowing to lead you. Now, we've experienced this. All of us experience this, right? What Jesus says in John 8, that he who sins is a slave to sin. Do you know that every little sin, every little decision to go against what God has spoken and God has led us to do, every little decision, although it seems like freedom, how many know it's actually bondage? How many know it's actually bondage? Like you think, oh, I'm being free. Oh, I can do whatever I want. Yeah, it's just a little lie. It's just a little porn. It's just a little lust. It's just a little fling. How many know there's no such thing as just a little sin? But that little sin, when you grab a hold of it, you think, oh, it's just a little bit. I can control this. Have you ever told yourself that? Surely I'm okay with this. What happens? Chain. And you know what happens a lot of times? Here's what I think actually happens in our life. It's a chain, but it's got a long leash on it. It's a shackle, but it has a long extension. So you can feel like you're still somewhat free. And you know what ends up happening? The more that you give into it, that leash gets smaller and smaller and smaller. The thing you thought you could control is now controlling you. See, if we're not led by God, we will be dominated by someone else. God is a good king. God is a gracious king. God wants to be gracious and kind, and he wants to bless us. He is a benevolent dictator. He is good. But sin is a harsh taskmaster. And when we give into the flesh, we give into our desires, that stuff is going to continue to pull us down. That's what's happening with the nation of Israel. That's what happens in our life. When we think we know best, we think, I've got this, I'm in control, we're actually moving to the place where we will not experience much control at all. That's the first warning sign. It's thinking we know best. Second warning sign is this: when we want to be like everyone else. We want to be like everyone else. I love how honest the nation of Israel is here. They say, such as all the other nations have. Do you know what they're saying? They were supposed to be this example of God's goodness. The nation of Israel was supposed to be a beacon of what God was like when his people were following him. God wanted to bless them, to raise them up, to be a light to the nations, to be an example to all peoples. Like that was their promise, that was their destiny. God wanted to use them for that. God wanted to raise them up for that. But they were looking at what everybody else had. They wanted to be like the other nations. They said, look at that nation. Their king has a crown. We don't have any crowns. They have a throne. We don't have a throne. We just got a guy who prays. We just got a guy who reads scripture. We just got a guy who will give us spiritual counsel. We want a ruler just like the other nations have. You know what this is? It's cool kid syndrome. Do you guys remember cool kid syndrome? Like when you're in 7th grade and that cool kid like had the cool shoes and you're like, I want to be like the cool kid. I want the cool shoes and the cool hair. If I could only have that, then I would be cool. Like it's weird because like now I have kids and I'm seeing this happen in my kids, you know, and it's like Pokemon cards, you know, right now. It's like the big, like it's just huge. Like it's hilarious. But they're like, you know, they claim that they're worth hundreds of dollars. They're not. Like, I just know that they're not. But they're like so excited about it. And they're so like, oh, if I only had that Pokemon, you know, it's like, that kid has a Pokemon card. He's cool, and I want to be like that kid. And I want that. It's not fair, and this and that. And so it's all about Pokemon. It's all about keeping up with the other kids' Pokemon collection. Now, here's what's funny. One day, they will laugh at this. One day, they'll be like, I can't believe I was so consumed about Pokemon cards. But you know what? Some of us never grow out of cool kid syndrome, right? We're always thinking about the other. We're always looking at what someone else has. We're always desiring what someone else has. We're always looking at what someone else has, saying, if I had that, if only I could have that. And it's a huge warning sign for us. It's an open door to the enemy. When you are finding yourself drawn to what everybody else has instead of focusing on celebrating on what you have, that's when you know King Me is taking place. That's when you know King Me is beginning to rule in your life. That's why we did the gratitude challenge this past week. And I hope all of you joined in with us. If you didn't, then do it this week. And I pray that we'd all do it every week for the rest of our lives. The whole idea was the first thing you do in the morning, spend time thanking God for what you have instead of starting worried about all the things you don't have. And you know, it sets your heart in a good direction. It sets your heart on King Jesus as opposed to King Me. Because here's what happens. We end up living in cool kid syndrome. And I think when we get to heaven, you may make it to heaven, but you're going to look back and you'll be like, man, I was all obsessed about Pokemon cards. You could live your life obsessed about Pokemon cards. And more dangerous than that, the thing that you set your affection on could destroy your life. When you start looking at your neighbor and how big their house is and you make it all about that, all of a sudden you're just driven by greed. Or you look at, you say, well, how come my spouse isn't like their spouse? Or how come my job isn't like their job? And you constantly live in comparison. Listen, comparison is a killer. Comparison will kill your joy. It will kill your life. It will kill God's reign and rulership over your life, and it will lead you down a path you do not want to go. King Me will begin to take place when comparison is over you. One of my favorite verses, and we don't have it on the screen, but it's Proverbs 28:19. It says this: those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies will have their fill of poverty. It's one of my favorite verses. So one who takes care of what they have, that person's always going to be provided for, but the person who chases after fantasies, you're always going to come to ruin. When you're always looking at something else and someone else, and comparison is a killer, and it will mess you up. So here's the thing, let me just ask you, are you comparing yourself to someone else in any way right now? Are you being driven by that? Is that messing you up a little bit? Here's the good news. God made you with the gift set that you have. He made you with the personality that you have. He made you with the calling that you have. And when you're led by that and you're consumed by that, when you're at peace with that, there is a joy. There is a life that happens. You don't have to be comparing yourself to everybody else. Just enjoy where you are right here and right now. And the last warning sign for us that I want to give us today is this: when we think our present reality is all that we'll ever have. So when we think our present reality is all that we'll ever have, that's a warning sign. Basically, what happens with the nation of Israel is they say, now appoint a king to lead us. You know what they're saying? We want it, and we want it now. Right now. You know what's interesting? They were going to get a human king. They're going to get a human king. God had promised a human king, one that would be without fault, one that would be without flaw, one that would be perfect. A human king was coming. He was going to be the best king. He was going to be the King of Kings. And he would rule them perfectly. But they wanted it. You know, the moments when we get most off track is when we get impatient with God's timing in our life. Say, God, you promised this, and I want it now. I want it right here. I want it right now. I want your protection right now. I want your interaction right now. Watch what they say. They say, then we will be like the other nations. They justify their sin with a king to lead us and to go out before us and to fight our battles. You know what's so amazing about this? They say fight our battles, but you know what God had been doing? Fighting their battles. Do you remember when they left Egypt? The plagues? Like, God did that. Like, there's no way they could have done that. And they ended up leaving with a bunch of Egyptian gold. They plundered the Egyptians because God had fought their battles. Even just recently, that was a long time ago, but even just recently, in 1 Samuel chapter 7, you see this. But that day the Lord thundered with loud thunder. They were up against the battle. The Philistines had them surrounded. And Samuel prays. That was how they experienced their victory. That's how they experienced their deliverance. Samuel prayed. And the Lord thundered with loud thunder against the Philistines and threw them into such a panic that they were routed before the Israelites. Now, I know like dogs can get worked up like when a storm happens, and or kids can get like excited and kind of get nervous. But we're talking about a Philistine army that gets all bent out of shape, freaks out, and all of a sudden a scared, frightened Israel army is able to go and beat an army that they could have never beat before. Why? Because God was fighting their battles. I just wonder, how could they get so off track? How could they get from that place where God was literally doing these unbelievable miracles for them, and now all of a sudden they're missing out on experiencing the supernatural in their life because how did they do that? It didn't happen that long ago. It's because they forgot. They forgot God's goodness. They weren't focused on God's goodness. They weren't reminding themselves, God's been good to me before. He's going to be good to me again. This is why, like, if you're on a Christian journey, like journaling and constantly reporting about how God has come through for you is such an important key to your spiritual life. Because you'll have an answer to prayer come through, but you'll be like, that was a miracle. No way that happened. And then you'll quickly move on to the rest of your life and you'll forget about it. And when you forget about it, that's when the enemy comes in and he gets you all distracted. He thinks, well, now you're not going to have God with you. Why would you not think? He's been with you. Of course he's going to be with you again. Of course he is. But you got to remember, you got to stir yourself up and say, God, you've been with me before. You're going to be with me again. But the main thing, the best thing about this that we're going to see in this series, we're going to see this is that our present reality isn't all that we'll ever have in this way. And it's that God can take our bad decisions and bring good out of them. Because what's interesting with the nation of Israel? We're going to find out that God is going to bring a king, the King of Kings, the promised king, the Messiah, and he's actually going to use this jacked up lineage of the nation of Israel, King David's line. He's actually going to do this nice redemptive thread all throughout history just to make a statement. And the statement is this: it's not my will that you sinned. It's not my will that you brought a king, but I'm going to take what is a bad decision and I'm going to bring something really good out of it. And that should be great encouragement to us this morning. It's that no matter what you've done, no matter where you are, no matter what you've made your king, God can turn that around, and he can turn it around right now. And it comes down to this: setting our affections and saying, God, I'm going to set my heart on you. God, I'm going to set my desire on you. God, I'm going to focus on you. God, I'm going to let you be my king. Not King me, but King Jesus. Not me in control, but you in control. Not me at the top, but you. That's where everything makes sense. That's where the greatest joy is. That's where we're going to experience the greatest peace, is when Jesus is king of our hearts. And that's what my prayer is for us as we get ready to go in this series, is that God will help us to reorient ourselves, learn lessons practically, but the most important lesson is that he is ultimately the king of our lives. Would you pray with me, Father?